He thought his dead uncle's ranch was nothing but land and timbers left to gather dust. But when 8 desperate widows surrounded him and said, "The breeding starts now," it left only one question: had he inherited a homestead or a destiny bound by their fierce demands for survival? Colt Mercer had ridden 3 days across blistering plains to reach Ash Hollow, a town so small the map barely marked it. His uncle's passing had left him one thing a ranch said to be empty, a place Colt figured he could sell off or settle down in after years drifting from saloon to saloon. The inheritance was supposed to mean freedom, not another fight. Yet, as the sun bled red across the horizon, the first sight of the ranch sent a shiver through him. The front gate hung open, rocking slightly with the evening wind. The fences, though worn, were mended with fresh timber. A lantern flickered on the porch, too steady to have been left by accident. Colt slowed his horse. "Strange," he muttered. He'd been told the place was abandoned. No ranch hands, no family left. But the land breathed as though it had never been left alone. He dismounted, boots sinking into dust that had been freshly stirred. The smell of smoke carried from the chimney. His hand drifted near the Colt revolver on his hip, not yet drawn, but ready. The porch creaked beneath his step. That's when he noticed movement in the shadows. Not one figure, but many. 8 silhouettes, tall and broad-shouldered, filling the doorway as though they'd been waiting for him. The lantern light caught their faces as they stepped forward. Women, towering, hard-eyed, weathered by the sun and scarred by the kind of life only widows of the frontier knew. Each wore black in her own way, bonnets, shawls, dresses, stitched and patched, some with belts that carried knives or shotguns. The tallest of them, a woman with iron-gray hair braided down her back, looked him over with a gaze that carried no fear. Her voice was rough but steady. "You must be Mercer's boy, the nephew." Colt swallowed the dry lump in his throat. "I am. Name's Colt Mercer. This land is mine now, by blood and by will." A low chuckle rippled among them, but it wasn't kind. The gray-haired one stepped closer, her boots striking wood like hammer blows. "Your uncle's land hasn't been empty. We've kept it. We've worked it. We've defended it." Colt glanced between them, his pulse quickening. 8 women, each with the look of someone who'd buried a man and carried on without him. "And who might you be?" he asked. The leader's eyes gleamed in the lantern light. "We're the widows, 8 of us. Our husbands were outlaws, taken by bullets, lawmen, and the desert. We came here when your uncle passed. And now," her voice lowered into something sharp and final, "the breeding starts now." The words struck like a gunshot in the quiet night. Colt felt his breath hitch. He'd faced ambushes before, but nothing like this. 8 women stood before him, not asking, not pleading, but demanding. The ranch was no longer his to claim. It was theirs. And whether he liked it or not, Colt Mercer had just stepped into their world. If you were in Colt's boots, what would you do? Fight, run, or stay? Tell us in the comments. Colt held his ground, though every instinct told him to back away. 8 pairs of eyes fixed on him, each carrying its own weight of loss and fury. These weren't ordinary women keeping house. They were survivors hardened by the frontier, bound together by something deeper than kinship. The gray-haired leader stepped forward again. "Martha Grange," she said, tapping her chest. "I speak for us all." She pointed one by one as the others shifted into the light. Clara, Ruth, Hazel, Lou, Dinah, Pearl, and the twins, Agnes and Ada. Each name landed heavy, like a hammer striking a nail. Colt's gaze moved from face to face. Clara's cheeks bore scars that ran down to her neck, reminders of some fire she must have endured. Ruth's hands were calloused and stained, the hands of a woman who could wield an axe as easy as a spoon. Hazel, though younger, had a sharpness in her stare that spoke of nights spent on guard with a rifle. Lou stood broader than most men, her arms folded like iron bars. Dinah, quiet, watched him with eyes that seemed to measure his worth without speaking a word. Pearl had a sadness that never lifted, though her grip on the shotgun in her arms betrayed resolve. And the twins Agnes and Ada mirrored each other's movements, their smiles faint but unnerving, like reflections in a broken mirror. "This ranch was left to me," Colt said, squaring his shoulders. "I'll not be turned out of it." Martha's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Turned out? Boy, you misunderstand. We don't want you gone. We want you here." Her words carried a weight Colt didn't like. "You mean to make me a prisoner?" "No," Clara answered, her scar pulling tight as she spoke. "You're no prisoner. You're the key. This ranch needs more than hands. It needs blood. It needs a future." Pearl stepped forward, her voice softer but filled with grief. "Every man we had lies in the ground. They left us nothing but land, hunger, and the ghosts that won't stop calling. We won't be left to fade away." Colt's throat tightened. He had expected dust and silence, maybe an old barn to his name. Instead, he'd walked into a covenant of desperate women, each bound by the same vow: survival. "You think I'll go along with this?" Colt asked, his voice steady, though his chest hammered. Martha's eyes narrowed. "You will, or you won't. That's your choice. But understand, this land out here doesn't stay empty. If it ain't worked, it gets stolen. If it ain't defended, it gets burned. We've kept it alive, and we've claimed it. You can be part of it, or be buried beneath it." The others murmured in agreement, their voices like a rising storm. Colt felt the walls of the porch closing around him. 8 widows, united in a cause he hadn't chosen, now stood as both jury and jailer. The night wind cut across the ranch, cold against his sweat. He realized then that his uncle hadn't left him an inheritance. He'd left him a trial, and the widows weren't about to let him ride away. Colt rose before dawn, though he hadn't slept much. The widows had given him a corner of the bunkhouse, bare boards, a straw mattress, no door to close. He'd lain awake, listening to their voices drift from the main house, low and steady, like a council deciding his fate. Now, as the first gray light spilled across Ash Hollow, he stepped outside. The ranch looked different, in daylight, fences mended, fields plowed, livestock grazing in pens. This wasn't some forgotten patch of land. It was alive, worked hard, and guarded with a vigilance he could feel in the air. Hazel appeared first, rifle slung across her shoulder. She didn't greet him, only pointed toward the barn. "Work starts early here. You want a place, you earn it." Colt bit back a sharp reply and followed. Inside the barn, Lou waited, arms folded. She tossed him an axe. Timbers stacked out back, split enough for the stove before the sun's high. Her tone left no room for argument. He caught the axe by the handle, weighing its balance. "You put me to work like a ranch hand, but I didn't come here for wages." Lou's mouth curved into something like a sneer. "Didn't come here for charity either." She jerked her head toward the woodpile. "So swing." Colt set his jaw and did as told. Each strike echoed sharp in the morning air, chips of cedar flying. He worked until his shoulders burned, and when he finally paused, Hazel stood nearby, watching with that sharp-eyed stare. "Not bad," she admitted. "Better than most drifters who stumble through." By midday, the widows tested him further. Clara handed him a rope, pointing to a restless mare in the corral. "Let's see if you can break her," she said. Colt eyed the animal wild-eyed, snorting, ears pinned back. This wasn't about taming a horse. It was about taming him. He stepped into the corral, slow, steady, voice low as he approached. The mare reared once, twice, before he caught the rope and held firm. Dust rose, rope burned his palms, but he dug in his heels. Minutes felt like hours until finally the horse stilled enough for him to touch her neck. Colt stroked her gently, breath ragged. "Easy, girl. We're not enemies." When he looked up, the widows lined the fence. Some looked impressed, others dissatisfied. Dinah, the quiet one, gave the smallest nod, as though she'd seen what she needed. But Martha Grange, their leader, remained unreadable. "Strength counts," she said, "but strength alone doesn't keep a place alive." That night, they circled him again in the ranch house, their voices rising like wind before a storm. Pearl's sorrowful tone broke through the clamor. "We've lost too much already. If you mean to stay, you'll carry more than chores." Colt leaned back, eyes sweeping over them. "And if I refuse?" Martha's reply was cold as iron. "Then you'll find out what it means to be outnumbered." Colt felt the truth in her words. On this land, 8 widows weren't just survivors, they were a force. And now, he was caught in the center of their storm. The following days blurred into a gauntlet. Colt rose with the dawn and collapsed after dark, driven by tasks meant to wear him down. The widows weren't satisfied with words, they wanted proof. Hazel had him mend fence lines on the far side of the property. The posts leaned from years of wind, and barbed wire snapped at his gloves until his hands bled. She rode alongside on horseback, silent except for the occasional tighter, straighter. No praise, no complaint, just unyielding judgment. Lou tested him next, sending him into the pasture to wrangle a bull that had broken loose. The beast charged, horns low, kicking up dust. Colt had to think fast, using his rope to snag one horn and twist the bull's head just enough to drive it back toward the pen. When the gate finally slammed shut, Lou only grunted, "Could have been quicker," before walking away. By the 3rd day, Clara set him to chopping wood, until sweat poured down his back. Dinah gave him no tasks, only watched, quiet and steady, like a judge weighing each moment. Pearl often hovered nearby, offering water or wiping sweat from her brow, as though she wanted to say something but never found the words. The twins, Agnes and Ada, were different. They turned work into a game, pushing him into competitions. How many fence posts could he drive before sundown? How many sacks of grain could he haul from barn to porch? Their laughter carried an edge, as though they were daring him to break. Through it all, Martha remained distant. She gave no commands, but her eyes followed him. Every swing of the axe, every rope throw, every cut on his hands, she measured it. And Colt knew the judgment she kept silent was the only one that mattered. On the 5th evening, he sat outside the bunkhouse, shoulders aching, staring at the horizon where the sky burned with twilight. He had proven his body could endure. But what unsettled him most was not the work, it was the way the widows moved around him, always united, always circling like a pack. That night, the fragile unity began to crack. Inside the main house, raised voices cut through the silence. Colt lingered near the window, listening. "He's strong enough," Hazel argued. "Better than most." Lou snapped back. "Strength isn't loyalty. He'll run at the first chance." Pearl's voice quivered but carried weight. "Maybe we don't need loyalty. Maybe we just need hope." Martha silenced them with a firm knock on the table. "Hope doesn't keep the wolves off our land. If he stays, it's because he proves himself useful not just to one of us, but to all." Colt stepped back into the shadows before they spotted him. For the first time since arriving, he sensed a weakness among them: division. Their unity, sharp as iron on the surface, held fractures beneath. He clenched his fists. If he was going to survive Ash Hollow, he'd need more than muscle. He'd need to turn their rivalries into his only weapon. The moon rose high over Ash Hollow, silvering the ranch in pale light. Colt lay on the straw mattress of the bunkhouse, listening to the creak of wood and the faint murmur of voices from the main house. Sleep wouldn't come. The words he'd overheard still gnawed at him, fractures in their unity, doubts about his place. Finally, he swung his legs over the side of the bed, strapped on his boots, and slipped outside. The air was cool, carrying the faint smell of sage and the sharper tang of smoke from the chimney. He kept to the shadows, moving quiet as he circled the main house. In the barn, he lit a stub of a candle and began searching. His uncle's ranch had been more than a simple spread. Colt could feel it. Tools were lined with care, harnesses polished, and yet tucked beneath the order lingered a sense of secrecy. Behind a stack of feed sacks, his hand struck wood a chest, heavy and dust-covered. He dragged it out, heart thumping, and pried it open. Inside lay ledgers bound in cracked leather, pages filled with scrawled numbers and names. Colt flipped through, eyes narrowing. These weren't the accounts of cattle sales or grain. They were records of deals, trades made with men marked only by initials. Tucked within the ledger lay folded letters. Colt held one up to the candlelight. The handwriting was bold, deliberate. M. Grange, keep the women safe. They have claimed as much as blood. The ranch belongs to all, not just to me. When I'm gone, the heir will come. He must honor this pact, or the land will devour him. Colt's jaw tightened. His uncle hadn't left him a simple inheritance. He'd left him a bargain struck with these widows. They hadn't merely occupied the ranch, they'd been invited. Footsteps echoed outside. Colt snuffed the candle and pressed against the wall. Through the crack in the boards, he saw Dinah enter, lantern in hand. She moved with quiet purpose, as if she knew exactly where to look. Her eyes swept the barn before settling on the chest. She crouched, fingers brushing the lid, then hesitated. Colt stepped from the shadows. Looking for something? Her head snapped up, but she didn't flinch. You shouldn't be poking where you don't belong. Neither should you, he shot back, holding up the letter. Care to explain why my uncle promised this land to all of you? Dinah's face remained unreadable, but her voice carried a warning. That paper's older than your claim. He knew this ranch couldn't stand with one man alone. He bound it to us, to our bloodlines. Colt felt the weight of her words. So you think that gives you the right to rule me? Dinah rose, eyes cold as flint. Not a rule. Bind. You'll see soon enough. She left without another word, lantern swinging, leaving Colt in darkness with the letter trembling in his grip. The pact was real. His uncle hadn't left him a gift, he'd left him a curse. By morning, the ranch simmered with unspoken tension. Colt went about chores with the widow's eyes on him, but the air between them felt brittle, ready to snap. He couldn't stop thinking about the ledger, the pact written in his uncle's hand, bound to them, bound to this place. At breakfast, the first crack showed itself. Lou slammed a tin plate on the table. He's strong enough. We've tested him plenty. Let him work the land and be done with it. Hazel shook her head. Strength doesn't make him trustworthy. He hasn't chosen us. A man who hasn't chosen will run when the wind turns. Agnes smirked at her twin, Ada, and said, maybe that's why he should be tested differently. Their laughter rippled like a secret between them. Pearl finally spoke, her voice heavy with grief. What if he doesn't run? What if he stays? Would that be so terrible? We've all been empty too long. The room grew quiet. Martha's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. Enough. He'll prove himself to all of us, or he proves himself to none. Until then, there'll be no deciding. Colt set down his fork. You talk like I'm not in the room. Martha's eyes bored into him. Because your choice doesn't matter until you understand what's at stake. That day, Dinah led him to the fields, where weeds strangled the edges of the crops. Pull them out, she said flatly. All of them. Colt squatted in the dirt, hands working until his nails were black and his muscles screamed. Dinah stood in silence, arms folded, watching like a judge. When he finally straightened, sweat dripping from his brow, she said only, "Not bad," before walking away. By dusk, Clara cornered him in the barn. "You don't belong here," she hissed, scar twisting with her words. "They'll eat you alive, one way or another. Best you saddle up and go while you can." Colt met her gaze. "And leave the land to you?" Clara's eyes narrowed. "Better us than you. This place is blood-bound. You'll never be more than an outsider." Before Colt could reply, Lou strode in, overhearing. "Careful, Clara. Not all of us want him gone." The two women glared at each other, the air thick with old rivalries. For the first time, Colt saw it clearly. The widows weren't the ironclad force they wanted him to believe. They were fractured, each carrying her own scars and motives. That night, Martha summoned him to the main house. She stood by the fireplace, shadows dancing across her face. "You've seen us fight. You've heard our doubts. But don't mistake division for weakness. We're bound by more than grief." Colt crossed his arms. "Seems to me you're bound by desperation." Her eyes narrowed. "Desperation is what keeps people alive." Colt left the house with her words burning in his chest. The widows weren't united, but their desperation made them dangerous. And he, caught between their rivalries, was both their prize and their prey. Colt wandered further than he'd yet dared, following a narrow trail that wound behind the ranch house and up toward the rocky ridge. The widows had warned him to keep close, but curiosity gnawed at him. He needed to know what kind of ground he stood on. The trail ended at a clearing, half hidden by mesquite. The earth there was dark, uneven, dotted with wooden markers carved by hand, graves, dozens of them. He moved slowly among the markers, boots sinking into the soft earth. Each board bore a name or an initial, some half-rotted, others freshly carved. He stopped at one marker that read Elias Grange. The surname struck like a bell. Martha's husband. Further down the line, he found Jeb Loudon, Silas Harlan, Tom Keene. The names blurred together, but the pattern became clear. These were no ordinary ranchers. These had been outlaws, every one of them. Colt crouched, brushing dust from a marker where a faint carving of a pistol was still visible. The truth hit him hard. The widows weren't just survivors, they were the inheritors of outlaw blood, women bound by men who had died by bullet or rope. Behind him, the crunch of boots broke the silence. Colt spun, hand instinctively at his revolver. It was Pearl, her shawl pulled tight against the wind. "You weren't meant to see this," she said softly. Her voice carried no anger, only sorrow. Colt's eyes swept the graves again. "These men, your husbands, they were killers." Pearl's gaze dropped to the ground. "They were ours. For better or worse, we stood by them until the end. Some died in shootouts, some by the hangman's noose, some right here, defending this ranch. We buried them together." "Why hide it?" Colt asked. Her eyes glistened. "Because out here, a widow with an outlaw's name is worth less than dirt. People spit at you. Men try to take what little you have left. We only had each other. So we swore this land would be ours, no matter the cost." Colt looked over the rows of graves, the weight of the vow settling on him. "And me? Where do I fit into all this?" Pearl's sorrow hardened into resolve. "You're the heir, the blood your uncle left behind. To us, that makes you the key. This land must continue, or it dies. And if it dies, so do we." She reached for his arm, her touch cold and trembling. "You think this is about desire. It's not, it's survival. 8 widows against the world won't last. With you, we stand a chance." Colt pulled free, unease twisting in his gut. He had seen gunfights, betrayals, and ambushes, but this was different. The widows weren't asking, they were demanding his future, as if it were already written. As he turned to leave the clearing, his eyes caught the last marker at the row's end. The board had no name, just an empty space waiting to be carved. A grave left open. For the first time, Colt understood the depth of their vow. He was either their salvation, or he would join the soil beside the rest. The night air lay heavy over Ash Hollow, thick with the scent of smoke from the cook fire. Colt sat apart from the widows on the bunkhouse steps, his thoughts circling back to the graves and the empty marker waiting at the end of the row. He could still feel Pearl's trembling hand on his arm, hear her voice insisting his future was no longer his own. He had endured their tests, bent his back to their labor, and listened to their vows, but he would not let himself be chained. When the lanterns in the main house dimmed, he slipped inside the barn to gather his gear. The saddle was ready, revolver cleaned, horse restless. His plan was simple: ride out under moonlight, and put Ash Hollow behind him. But as he lifted the bridle, a low voice cut through the shadows. Going somewhere, Drifter? Hazel stepped from the dark, rifle slung across her shoulder. Behind her, Lou appeared, broad-shouldered and blocking the door. Colt tightened his grip on the bridle. I came here for an inheritance, not a noose. I'm leaving. Lou's laugh was low and hard. Leaving? You think it's that easy? Hazel's tone was sharper. You saw the graves. You know the pact. You walk away now, and this land swallows you whole. Colt's jaw tightened. Try and stop me. The standoff lasted a heartbeat too long. Then Lou lunged. Colt swung the bridle hard, the iron bit catching her across the temple. She staggered, cursing, while Hazel brought her rifle up. Colt dropped low, grabbing a pitchfork from the wall, driving its prongs into the dirt between them. The commotion drew the others. The barn doors burst open, and suddenly all 8 widows crowded inside. Martha at the front, eyes burning with authority. Clara stormed past her, knife glinting in her fist. The twins whispered to each other, half smiling, half feral. Martha's voice cut through the chaos. Enough! But Clara ignored her. She lunged at Colt, blade flashing. Colt twisted aside, shoving a hay bale between them. Clara's knife slashed empty air. Before Colt could recover, Lou barreled into him, knocking him against the stall. The horse shrieked, hooves striking the wall. The widows erupted, shouting, shoving, turning on one another in the cramped space. Hazel tried to hold Lou back. Clara shrieked at them both. The twins egged the fight on, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Colt used the chaos to scramble free, bracing himself against the barn wall. His chest heaved, adrenaline roaring in his veins. For the first time, he saw them not as a united force, but as fractured souls, grief, hunger, and jealousy boiling over into violence. Martha's voice finally thundered above the din. Stand down. She shoved Clara back, dragged Lou by the arm, silenced the twins with a glare. The barn went quiet, but for the ragged sound of breathing. Her gaze pinned Colt. You think you can break us from within? You're wrong. Whatever else happens, this land binds you to us. Colt wiped blood from his lip, eyes locked on hers. No, Martha. This land may bind you, but me, it'll bury before it owns. The storm had broken, and Colt knew the next clash would not end with words. By morning, the ranch felt like a tinderbox waiting for a spark. The widows moved through chores stiff and silent, their eyes avoiding one another. The brawl in the barn had left bruises not just on flesh, but on pride. Colt sensed it one more crack, and their fragile unity would shatter. He spent the day watching. Ruth hammered fence posts with a fury that split wood faster than iron. Hazel rode the perimeter, her rifle across her lap, glaring at shadows like she wished they'd turn into enemies. Clara cleaned her knife until the blade gleamed like silver lightning. The twins whispered and giggled as they hauled water, their glances flicking toward him too often, like conspirators planning a trick. That evening, clouds boiled over the ridge, and thunder rolled across the valley. The storm outside matched the one brewing inside. Supper was tense, every word brittle, every glance sharp. Martha tried to keep order, but her voice no longer carried the same weight. Colt finally set down his tin plate. This land's not a home, he said evenly. It's a cage. You've built it with blood and buried it with bones. I won't stay chained to it. The words struck like lightning. Clara slammed her fist on the table. You ungrateful dog! We gave you shelter, and you spit in our faces? Lou shoved back her chair. Maybe he's right. Maybe we've held this place too long. Hazel's eyes flared. Coward. You'd let wolves take what we've kept alive? The argument exploded, voices overlapping, curses flying. In the storm of shouting, Colt slipped away. He meant to saddle his horse and ride out once and for all. But fate moved quicker. Lightning split the sky, striking the north pasture. In seconds, dry grass roared to life. flames tearing toward the barn. The horses shrieked. Smoke billowed. Colt sprinted into the blaze. He ripped open stall doors, slapping the flanks of panicked animals until they bolted free. Sparks signed his shirt. Heat scorched his lungs. Behind him, the widows rushed in Pearl with a bucket, Dinah dragging a canvas tarp, the twins hauling water from the well. For a brief, fierce moment, survival united them again. Buckets passed hand to hand, dirt shoveled onto flames. Thunder cracked overhead, and rain finally came, hissing against fire until smoke replaced flame. When the last embers died, they stood in the mud, soaked, coughing, faces streaked with soot. The barn still stood, blackened but upright. Martha's voice cut through the wheeze of breath. "You see?" she rasped. "Together, we stand. Alone, we burn." Colt looked at them, 8 figures lit by the glow of dying fire. They were strong, yes, but broken too. Their unity was born of desperation, not trust. And he knew then, the ranch was no longer just a cage. It was a battlefield. And the final fight was still coming. The morning after the fire, Ash Hollow lay silent. Smoke still clung to the air, and the ground was wet with rain, mud swallowing every bootstep. The widows drifted through the ranch like ghosts, weary from the night's battle with the flames. Yet beneath their exhaustion, Colt sensed something sharper, an edge honed by survival, ready to cut again. Martha summoned him to the main house. He found her standing at the hearth, arms folded, iron-gray braid hanging down her back. The others gathered around her, faces grim, their shadows stretched long across the wooden floor. "You've seen the fire," Martha said. "See what happens when this land is left untended. Without us, without you, it'll wither. We can't let that happen." Colt met her gaze. "What you call survival, I call a graveyard. I won't be bound by a pact I never made." Clara spat on the floor. "Then you'll join the rest in the soil." Hazel lifted her rifle, but Martha raised her hand, halting her. "No, he gets one last chance. Choose, Colt Mercer. Stand with us, or stand against us." The room fell silent. The weight of their demand pressed against him, heavier than the smoke that still lingered outside. Colt's eyes swept across their faces, Lou's clenched jaw, Pearl's trembling sorrow, Dinah's cold stare, the twins' sly smiles. 8 women forged by loss, hardened into something near unbreakable. But not invincible. He took a slow breath. "I won't be your prisoner. I won't be your salvation either. This land belongs to none of us, it belongs to the dead, and I don't aim to join them." The words snapped the fragile thread. Clara lunged, knife flashing. Colt sidestepped, slamming her against the wall. Hazel's rifle rose, but Pearl shoved her arm aside, tears streaking her face. Lou charged, and Colt ducked, sending her sprawling into the table. The twins shrieked with laughter, circling like vultures, while Dinah moved silent as a shadow, reaching for his back. Colt spun, revolver drawn at last. The sound of the hammer cocking froze them. His voice cut through the chaos. "Enough!" The room stilled. His hand was steady, eyes burning. "You think this ranch will save you? It won't. It's swallowed every man who set foot here, and it'll swallow you too. But I won't be next." Martha stepped forward slowly, hands raised, her voice lower than a whisper. "Then leave, Colt Mercer. Ride away, and never return. But know this, you'll carry Ash Hollow with you, whether you want to or not." Colt held her gaze for a long moment. Then, without lowering his gun, he backed toward the door. The widows parted, their silence heavier than any bullet. Outside, the wind stirred the scorched earth. He saddled his horse, mounted, and rode hard into the rising Sunday. The ranch shrank behind him, its smoke curling like a warning against the sky. Ash Hollow was no inheritance. It was a curse. And though Colt left its gates behind, the echo of 8 widows' voices would haunt him for the rest of his days. "If you thought these were crazy, You won't want to miss what happens in this next video.